Oh, well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. It has been something of a break I seem to have taken. Each Marvel film I seem to create a longer and longer stretch between the viewings at this point. Almost as if, now that I'm coming to the end, the final stretch, I almost don't want to finish the retrospective, but we are, unfortunately, we're at that end point now. Really, I mean, there are still 5 films to go, but it is upon us, the time. But here we are. Finally, I get to talk about Black Panther, because this film is just, it's extraordinary on a number of levels. It's not just that it is a really solid MCU film, but there's just so many layers to it that are interesting to watch and think about, and the way that this is an example of how the silly comic book thing that people are like, oh, rolling their eyes going, oh, another MCU film, and yet it has the capacity to expand cinema and expand the way we convey stories and the kinds of stories that are being told. So all of a sudden, a filmmaker like Ryan Coogler can create a film that has so much social commentary and cultural relevance, and expand the ways in which, casts can be, you can have all black casts who are most majority black casts, barely set in America for, being an American film, and yet still hit all the notes that people love and want to watch, and convey a message that is universal and yet injects culture in a way that people don't expect. The formula of Black Panther is, on some level, if you strip it right down, is a very basic story. Obviously, all stories are basic, based on the seven the basic principle of there being 7 stories, but there's no real, like many MCU films, if you strip away some of the elements of it, it is just I suppose, another sort of regal type grab for power story about, a new king is challenged by an outsider, loses his initial confrontation, comes back, and sort of reasserts his authority to become even greater than he was before. And that story, is, it's almost a sportsman story. It's almost, it's very Rocky about it, but there is something very action movie about it. There's something very royal political drama about it, but it is very simple. It's a very simple storytelling, but as I've talked about before, a principle that I am trying to inject into my own thinking is the concept of simple, not basic. And this film, as I say, is simple, clear, but it is not basic. I've talked extensively before. At the beginning of when I first started doing these videos, I talked about Chadwick Boseman and his impact on cinema, and the loss of Chadwick Boseman was both an impact to the future of filmmaking and acting, but also culturally. He was bringing something in his performance that really could have changed the cinema landscape, and I talked about that in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And I didn't talk much about Black Panther because on one level I did anticipate that I would eventually come round to talking about Black Panther as a film, and on another level, I also Chadwick Boseman is much more than the Black Panther role. You know, he is such a complex and nuanced actor who has a very versatile filmography, even though it's, you know, it's actually quite a limited one. He will, you know, of course, he wasn't a he was taken well before his time, but again, he wasn't that young. But again, he had a fairly contained filmography. But even within that, there's versatility, and of course, everyone will remember T'Challa and his performance and how much he brought to it. But I didn't at the time want to just tar him with that role and go, yep, that is everything that Chadwick Boseman is, because I think he is much more than that. But saying that, he brought so much to the role of T'Challa. He brought so much pathos and weight and complexity and nuance to the role that, you know, even from Civil War to Black Panther, you get that sense of a character who you want to see more of. And even when he goes up against long-standing MCU heavyweights, you know, like Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr., he is magnetic on the screen. You want to just your eyes just want to be drawn to what Chadwick Boseman is doing. And so when it came to Black Panther being his solo film, it's just like everything, you know, he absolutely fills the screen. He fills the performance, and you just get so much from him. Saying that, Michael B. Jordan does give him a run for his money, because if there is an actor who can go blow for blow in performance, whether they're actually literally going blow for blow in their fight scenes or more in where their performances and their range and the scenes where they're separate and the scenes where they're together, never have I in recent memory point to two performances that are I want to see these two actors constantly, one other or both of them on screen, because there's just so much to them. I mean, I've been raving about Michael B. Jordan for years, and when he was brought on as Killmonger, he absolutely lived up to it, to the point where even though people now are saying, oh, couldn't they bring him back in some way, even though the character, spoilers, the character is killed at the end of the film, people are saying, oh, wouldn't it be great to see him in the sequel in some capacity? And of course, this is comic books, so anything is possible. But to demonstrate that and to be able to show this character with so much a villain with so much complexity to him, and a villain who, and this is now the phase of the MCU we're going to reach, but a villain that you sympathise with and you understand, and you go, oh, there is so much more going on with him, that some of these things we agree with, and on a superficial reading, so many people have gone, oh, he's right, he's absolutely right, and his actions were the right ones. He's not. He's absolutely not. But it is easy to mistake that and go, oh, you know, because his motives broadly, the motives that drive him on some level are correct, and the tragedy that made him, he was entirely the victim of. It is easy to mistake that as being, oh, he is the hero of his own story. Well, he is the hero of his own story, but he is a protagonist in a different story. He's not. He really is a villain, and unfortunately, that meant that they had to inject certain moments in the film just to justify going, see, this guy is evil. For instance, him strangling the gardener woman. But the fact that he's so rich and conflicted and complex means that you can't help but sympathise with him, and you can't help but just go, oh, I see where someone like this could be forged, and I can see where his outlook comes from, and there is a certain rightness inside of his wrongness. And as I say, him and Chadwick Boseman, blow for blow, they are a phenomenal duality. I mean, this is Heat levels of two actors that you just go, oh, they are phenomenal in this film together. Um, and I've talked a lot about with the MCU the fact that we're now phase 3 is the ambition phase. And I've talked how Civil War and Ragnarok demonstrated that by having, this sort of interplay of MCU storylines and having multiple key MCU characters all within the screen, and how much you can sort of fill every moment and every cameo and every reference in as much as possible. And that worked. Both those cases, I very much felt that worked. Or with something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where all of a sudden they show the scale of the universe and scale of visual effects. Probably no more than they did in the first Guardians, but again, you can see the ambition and the ideas on the screen, even if they don't quite always work. And of course, you could make the argument that, is it too much? How's someone supposed to watch a Marvel film without having seen another half dozen Marvel films before it? Would someone be overwhelmed by watching a film, even if they could understand the plot they're watching? Is there too much going on because these films are so ambitious at this point? And to go back to the simpler days of something like the original Thor or the original Iron Man, those stories might seem small scale compared to what we have now, but at least they're ways for people to enter the world. Well, Black Panther to me is the demonstration of how that can be done, because Black Panther is deep into the grand MCU storyline. It's not divorced from it. It absolutely is interconnected with it. And of course, if you've seen Civil War, you get a sense of what's come before. But you could watch this film standalone, and you would absolutely be able to follow it. It has a big scale, but you understand the scale. It's not impenetrable. It is absolutely a story that you can sit and go. You could watch Black Panther having never seen an MCU film before and go, no, I understand this. I understand what's going on. The characters are clear. The arc is clear. You could watch Black Panther and never watch another MCU film again and still feel like you have been given a really good film. And I think that's the strength. When MCU does that, it is at its absolute strength. At the minute, I'm seeing a lot of conversations now that Loki has come to an end, and that with Black Widow, that people are starting to be concerned about the impenetrability of the MCU, that we're going to get stories like with Loki, you get that sense of, oh, this is so mired by things that they're setting up, that does the story make sense by itself anymore? Or Black Widow drops in because it was in the past of the MCU. It references things that, unless you've seen Infinity War, Endgame, do these things make sense? And again, it's setting up for the future. And you think, and the concern is, because this is now the great soap opera, the great serialized drama, this is essentially a TV series through a series of feature films, are people not going to be able to just jump in? Black Panther, again, is the demonstration that can be done. Of course, we have things like Shang-Chi, we have the Eternals. I'm a little concerned about both those films for various reasons, but they are clearly demonstrations of ways that the MCU is thinking about how new viewers can start with these films. And of course, you've got Black Panther: Wakanda Forever coming. And of course, the big question is, with the loss of Chadwick Boseman, what will that film look like? How can that film exist? Should this film be made? Black Panther, as I say, works so well as a standalone film. It's very much you will watch it and know one way or another. I have faith in Ryan Coogler. I think he's a phenomenal filmmaker. I think the fact that most of the cast who was in this film will be returning for Wakanda Forever, so that includes Shiri, Okoye, M'Baku. They are definitely. This film is trying to make Wakanda the character of the film. Now, whether they make Shuri the new Black Panther is yet to be seen, or whether it will be more ensemble and more about all these characters trying to sort of fill the space left by Black Panther. It's all to sort of be seen. But I honestly think Ryan Coogler wouldn't make the film unless he felt he had a story he could tell without Chadwick Boseman. I think there is no way you won't feel the absence. There was no other way to do it because recasting would have been just horrific. Trying to sort of digitally insert would have been horrific. But I also think it honours Chadwick Boseman's legacy and the legacy of the Black Panther story to try and continue it, not to ignore it, because I think that's not what he probably would have wanted. He would have, this is such a phenomenal cultural touchstone that even in the Oscars they acknowledged Wakanda Forever, indicates that this is the kind of narrative that people want to see injected, and it has an impact outside of itself. And I think whatever that means, whether this works or not, we'll just have to see. Unfortunately, there is no way of telling until we are sat in the cinemas watching the film. But yeah, this is such a great film. It's such a great film. Unfortunately, I've talked more about the themes and ideas than I have actually talked about the narrative of the film. But frankly, see this film. If you come to these videos to question whether you should see a film or not, this is a no-brainer. You should see this film. This is such a great film. Yes, there are things that don't quite work. It does do that thing where it has the final fight be a character facing off against a sort of reverse version of itself, and it does fall into CG versus CG on a CG background fight that honestly is the least interesting part of the film. Maybe there was a way to make the physical fighting interesting, and I think some of the earlier fights are great, and the battle scene is great, but yeah, the T'Challa Killmonger fight, frankly, it's not a particularly, or the final T'Challa Killmonger fight is not particularly interesting. The killing off of Ulysses Claw, I think, is also a shame, mainly because I think Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis is a great actor, but not in this. Andy Serkis was so good as Claw, and I think it's a shame that they do kill him off. In terms of the internal narrative, yes, he absolutely needed to be killed off. It makes sense inside the story we're watching. But it's a shame because Andy Serkis gives such a good performance here. And his character's so interesting. And he is supposed to be the main villain of Black Panther in the comics. It doesn't matter. I just think it's a shame. But yeah. There are things in the film you go, well, this doesn't quite work and this doesn't quite like those features. But frankly, this is another example of a film being greater than the sum of its parts. And I think it's absolutely worth watching just to get that sense of, sort of pseudo-African culture, because it is, a sort of hodgepodge of ideas that come from African cultures, and of course they had set designers and costume designers and people who were trying to create a unique idea of an African culture whilst being futuristic, whilst also being sort of historical, and sort of merging these elements together to create this wholly unique society. And it looks so interesting, and yet you don't feel like it's an alien world. You feel the sense of, okay, there are things here that absolutely are alien, but there is a human relatability to it. There is a sense of, oh, this could exist in our world with this super future tech, and the way that the tech works, the mechanics of it are fantastic. So I do think this is such good world building for the MCU, such a cool visual style, and such a great addition, another layer to the grand story. This is such a phenomenal film in my eyes. It's so good. But as I say, we are now reaching the final stretch of the MCU, because the next film is Infinity War. And then, of course, there are a couple of separate films, that are part of the MCU. But we are now in the sort of the climax, the big ending of this chapter of the story, the Infinity Saga, I think they call it. And so these next couple of weeks are going to be real interesting. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it's all helping the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about films, TV shows, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Wakanda forever. Take care.